Well, I guess despite the obvious, adding value, that is essentially what it is. But I guess the way I look at it is it's adding value in the eyes of the end consumer. So that can take a number of forms. It could be as simple as putting, a sticker on your apple that says, grown in Traverse City, Michigan. All of a sudden that has value to somebody who lives in Grand Rapids or Chicago and vacations up here because they associate this area with farms and cuisine and wine and other things as well. So it can be just really an identification of where the product came from adds value. Being local or organic adds value. Or taking, the other, I think more obvious one to most of us is taking a fruit or some commodity crop or locally grown product and just processing it in some way to bring more value to it, whether that's pitting it, peeling it, freezing it, packaging it, cooking it, whatever, just adding some extra process step in that, getting that product to the end consumer. There's a lot of ways to add value.
Okay, and of course, what you do here is processing. So that's your specific niche or piece of this.
Yeah, so we do, for example, bottling, and that's only one piece of value adding. So if I make a fruit preserve, for example, a lot of my fruit leaves a farm and it goes through another value adding process, which could be that pitting, peeling, coring, slicing, dicing, freezing, or something along those lines that we don't necessarily do here. But then we take that product once it's been processed to another level, and then we put it into another product or ingredient, make jam or salsa or barbecue sauce or salad dressing or whatever the case may be. And then somebody else will buy that from us if it's a private label customer or one of our brands, and they'll do something with it sometimes to add value to it as well by how it's packaged or displayed or distributed or marketed, that sort of thing. I think, based on our experience with all the companies that have, come through Food for Thought over the years who are developing new products, I think one of the gaps that I see in some entrepreneurs' understanding of the market is really who they're marketing to. I think a lot of them look out into the world and see, boy, I want to get this into Walmart and, Costco and move a ton of my product and make lots of money and sell thousands of units. And in reality, in that market, that's a price-driven market. And if you're a penny more, you're just not going to sell in that market. And there's no way you're going to produce on a small scale, whether Food for Thought's making it or you're making it or somebody else, and compete with those sorts of prices. So it's important really to focus on where you can compete. And where you can compete are really in the value areas outside of price. And that's going to be things like your story. It can be the other values you bring, like being local, being organic, being fair trade. And again, having that direct contact with your consumers. All purchases in big box stores are anonymous. It's a customer who's just looking at a package and a price and making a decision. Where you can compete in environments where you're meeting your customers, whether you're doing a tasting at a local food co-op or whether you're selling at a farmer's market. You're meeting people, you're telling your story, they're sampling your product, and all of a sudden, you can compete. Somebody in that environment is going to pay sometimes twice as much or more for a product because of those values. I think that's really important for anybody to understand, starting a food business from the ground up or from the farm up.
So it's a relationship.
Absolutely. It's all about building relationships, and you don't do that in big box stores. Not to mention, too, that, in the big box stores, these are all factory, industry scale foods, whether they're organic or whether they're conventional, they're made in factories all over the world. I mean, even Whole Foods jam, as an example I gave, is made overseas. It's organic, but it's made overseas. And you're not going to compete on that kind of a price. There just isn't any way. So another important piece here that I've found is really that knowing your customer and knowing what it is they want and also what it is they value in your product. For a lot of years, I went on the assumption that people came to my product because I was organic and local and, the only fair trade jam or whatever in the country, and these sorts of things were my assumptions. And when I really started, questioning some of my customers, I found out actually that the majority of them were coming to me because of the quality of my products. Those other things were nice, but it was actually the quality that kept bringing them back. Now, certainly I have what I would call my core customers who come to me specifically because of the organic and the fair trade and the local. But again, you can't assume, all the time just because you think so. You really do have to know your customer and ask them questions and find out what it is they value in your products, because it allows you to, know how to market and where to go to find those customers. So the other piece that you were referring to, Jim, was that I often hear Patty say at the MLUI, which I think is really something worth repeating, and that is don't neglect the middleman. there's a lot of value-added startups that feel like they have to do and control everything from the time a seed goes in the ground all the way to when that product is handed to a customer, all the way at the retail end. And in that process, there's growing, there's processing, there's packaging, there's distribution, there's marketing. And I haven't seen very many successful models that do that all unless they're on a really small sort of homestead scale. And if you think about it, there are people that can do all of those things better than you. So if you really need to take an assessment of, what's the best value and use of your time, it's probably out there selling product, meeting customers, telling your story, and building the whole story around your product is really good use of your time. If you're going to spend all your time, in a production room, bottling and packaging, or driving around with product in the trunk of your car, trying to make your own deliveries, or whatever the case may be, you're probably not using your time well if you're doing everything. And then, of course, if you just try to hire people to do all those, then you end up managing lots of people doing those things. So by saying don't neglect the middleman, you'll probably find that distributors can distribute product cheaper than you can. Processors and packers can probably pack it cheaper than you can, or farmers can probably grow it cheaper than you can, or whatever the case may be. You can do one or a few of those things, but trying to do them all generally makes for a challenging business model. That's really important because I always try to recommend to customers, don't do this on your own. There's no sense being a solo startup because there's so much helpful information and support organizations out there to help you start a company. I mean, for example, we've got chambers of commerce. My chambers of commerce that I'm members of have been incredibly helpful for me when my company was a startup and for just ongoing information and support. The SCORE volunteer programs that are managed by the chambers are incredibly helpful, which comprise, retired executives that live in your community who have some experience in your line of work, who can bring levels of skill and experience that you might not have or you don't necessarily can't afford. Product Development Center at Michigan State University, if you happen to be in Michigan, and they exist in other states as well, are tax dollars that go to helping agricultural-based startups get going in the state of Michigan. Incredible resource. They'll help you write business plans and find sourcing and do data research for you and pretty much make sure you get started on the right foot and save you a lot of money. SBTDCs are national organizations that funnel federal monies to help agricultural startups, and there's just so much more. I mean, it really is worth it to do the research and find all those organizations out there that are willing to help you, and they'll help you find other organizations, and it just kind of feeds upon itself, and before you know it, you've got a half-time job just managing all the help that's coming your way. So that's a critical part of starting a value-added company. Build relationships and differentiate. Those are the two key things for me.